Hetepu, namaste, Haru Nefer. This is Kasank Maya Keparu with a live broadcast for you. And today we're doing something very unique. This is a hangout, and I have a couple of people who are, they watch my channel, and we decided to get together and talk about Tales of Reality Manifestation. So basically what this is that we're going to be exchanging notes and talking about things in our lives that happen that seem to be miraculous. Now, one of the things I've learned from some of the teachers that I've worked with or followed is that when you have something that happens in your life, whether you call it synchronicity or reality manifestation or reality transurfing, when something kind of mushrooms and it's to your benefit, you want to take notes such as what day it happened, what time it happens, how were you feeling, what were you thinking, who was with you, because what you want to do is to be able to duplicate those things in your life so you can have a very fruitful and productive life. And these things that happen to us, we're taught in this modern society that they're one-offs, that they're kind of flukes, but these are things that we can control, that are within our realm, so that we can duplicate the process and have these things happen when we need. And this is the whole principle about Ma'at. Ma'at is abundance. And this is how you are meant to live. You weren't meant to live in scarcity. And unfortunately, we're given false information about how things and how reality works. And remember, the conscious observer, which is you, dictates how reality unfolds. So always keep that in mind. So I just want to say, hi to the two guests we have. We have GK Sigma. Hetepu, brother, how you doing? Or as he may have stepped away. And then we have Elle, and she's a lovely woman. Say hi, Elle.
Hi, hello.
All right. So I think, yeah, GK stepped away for a bit. So I just want to start and just talk about my own story. There have been so many events and synchronicities in my own life, but there were a couple that were just pivotal. They were points of where I began to realize that there is just something different about this world, this reality that we live in, and it kind of forced me to look at things in a very different way. You know what I mean? And I think I've told this story on my channel a couple of times where once I was dying. Well, here's one example. Once I was dying to get my screenplay sold, and I was trying to meet people in Hollywood, trying to connect with people, but it wasn't working for me. So one day, and this happened in New York on Grand Central and 42nd Street, I'm walking down the street and I hear somebody yelling, Opie, Opie. And I was like, who's Opie? I turned around and lo and behold, there is Ron Howard and Brian Grazer walking down the street. Now, if you're not familiar with Ron Howard and Brian Grazer, at the time, they had just, I believe it was Apollo 13 and some other things. They were the biggest producer-director team ever. And I've always admired Ron Howard. And I followed his story about, coming up from being an actor to being a successful director and his producing partner. So immediately I ran up to them and I started talking to them. And these guys were super cool to me. They stopped and Ron was talking to me and he was like, well, what's your project? Tell me about your project. And I pitched him my project. And it was like the greatest time meeting these two guys and having them be so friendly and so open to listening to my project. And they gave me some really good advice. And from that point on, I started to see more synchronistic events to where I was meeting other important Hollywood people and connecting with them and getting my screenplay out there. And I remember going back and tracing all of that, and I was saying, what was I doing at the time? What was I thinking? How? And I remember specifically one of the things I was doing is I was going to sleep dreaming about meeting these important people. And I would take that from the conscious mind to the subconscious mind. And I said, you know what? That was the key. And I tried to reproduce that. But there were other factors in there that helped me to have those connections. So that's just one story among many. And I encourage you all out there too, is to don't look at these things as something that just an oddity or it just happened. Really examining your life, what was going on and what were you doing, what were you thinking, so that you can reproduce those effects. And it could be from anything from acquiring money, meeting important people. And I used to coach actors. And one of the things I was trying to tell them is that You don't have to go out there and chasing producers. You can do it such in a way such that the producers will come to you. And that was extraordinary because, people don't believe that. They're like, what do you mean that they'll come to me? I said, well, if you are working through the process of synchronicity, you can set things up so that you'll be in the right place at the right time to meet the right people. And slowly but surely, a lot of people began to pick up on what I was saying and starting to utilize the technique. But however, one of the things you have to keep in mind is that although, these things work, you're constantly getting bombarded, okay? Bombarded by the social programming, social engineering, which is consistently telling you, oh, no, these things don't work. These things are one-offs, they're flukes. And even right now, I would say in the last 10 years, the scientific arena was totally against this. Now with the introduction, with things like quantum mechanics and understanding the quantum field, they are now realizing that this is true because the principle of quantum mechanics talks about entanglement, all right? That all things are really connected, all right? And when we talk about the 0-point energy field, we're really talking about this field of where thoughts and information is exchanged. So the idea of being at the right time at the right place is now something that the scientific community is embracing wholeheartedly. So, Elle, I don't know if you want to share some of your experiences or your thoughts on what I just said. Hello?
Either of us?
Yeah. I was saying Elle. I didn't know if you were away, but any one of you.
Did you want to go first, sis?
Sure, I can. Oh my goodness, my kid is like screaming in the back. Sorry. Well, one thing that was kind of like a chain of synchronistic events for me that was pretty pivotal for me recently, stemmed from me trying to spend more time in nature. So I don't imagine myself to just be, like a tree hugging whatever person, but I felt like it was important for me I went through a phase where it was really important for me to just spend time out in nature, clearing my mind. I felt very connected to trees and things like that. And so, it sounds crazy, but I just had this urging that I should try to ground myself, by being barefoot on, grass or whatever, or near trees and things like that. And so in doing that, I felt like I was led or guided to spend more time in another area it's kind of like a popular area where I live at. It's like a walking path and they have trees and stuff there. And so I felt like it was important for me to go visit there. And so in going there, I was so happy to go. I was so excited. And then when I got there, I was overwhelmed with fear and this sense of feeling as if, I couldn't do it. And it was kind of irrational. It didn't make any sense to me why I would feel that way. But it was almost like this crippling, paralyzing fear. And so it really stuck with me because I don't consider myself to be a scary person or a person who has issues with, doing things like that. But it started to bring up in me some things that were subconsciously things I needed to deal with. And, one of those things was the need to be comfortable with venturing out of my comfort zone in ways that force me to, I don't know how to say it, in ways that force me to have to be on my own. Because when I was taking this walk, I was going by myself, and in doing that, it just, when the fear came up, it was this sense of, I had this fear that some animal was going to jump out or something. And I guess you could look at it and say, at one level, well, yeah, you should be afraid. Yeah, of course an animal could jump out and get you. But, this was a walking path. There were other people that usually are there. But it just really stuck with me. And I didn't want to just let it go and let it just be this thing. It stuck with me. And I felt like this is a blockage. This is something I need to look into. And so one thing led to another. I call it like my breadcrumbs, which is like where, you know, you get a thought and you kind of just follow your guidance and, you know, different things that you get. And in doing this self-reflection, I started to recognize that, you know, I had issues with personally with, you know, just stepping out of my comfort zone, being in certain situations. And through that, I was able to synchronistically find a support group of other people that were dealing with something similar. And it just so happened that what they did was they did social events where they would all go together and go out in nature and go outdoors and do things. And the very first trip that they did was a trip to go see this tree on this nature path that I was scared to go to by myself. And they didn't know anything about it. I didn't tell them anything about it. It was highly personal. You know, it was hard. I mean, it's hard to express those kind of things when you're going through them, you know, just trying to, you know, elaborate on it to where other people can understand it. But to see externally, to have that confirmation of other people that I felt led to for this other thing, and that was something that they did, and we all did that together. It was very healing for me because I got to do the thing that I've had so much fear in doing, that I wanted to do. And it was almost like a confirmation that, you know, this is where you're supposed to be at to get this healing, to grow in this space. You know, you're getting what you need in this group of people. And from there, it just kicked off like this whole chain of events and a whole bunch of other things in my life as well, having had that experience, which kind of like laid the foundation for a whole bunch of other things to start kicking off. So, you know, it's kind of like an abstract thing, but I hope that that kind of comes across a little bit as best as possible, you know, how synchronicity.
Yeah, so you basically listened to your inner voice, which led you there, which led you then to meeting other people, correct?
That's correct.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. That's the inner intuition aspect of it, telling you, hey, go here. Hey, do this. So that's really cool. So GK, what about you?
All right. So I've got like two things that have been pretty consistent throughout my adult life and maybe even before I was grown that have pretty much been a precursor towards success, whether it was career, whether it was romance, whether it was personal goals, personal things that I'm creating. Two things it seems that I always did when I was able to succeed. One of them was not telling anyone.
Yeah.
For some reason, as soon as others around me, it doesn't matter if it's family, close friends, whoever it is, as soon as they know about something for whatever reason, I don't know how the universe works exactly, but all of a sudden it goes downhill. You ever experienced that before?
Yeah, that's a big thing. I've noticed that even in my life is that when you are telling people something, it doesn't manifest. But when you keep it quiet and you're slowly working towards it, that's when it kind of like blows up on you, and it's great, you know?
Yeah, and it's one other thing that I've taken note of for myself, and I think it's the opposite of what I hear a lot of. I hear how the more you dwell on something, that's the reality that you will actually create. For me, it's actually been the opposite. If it's something that I want or need, it seems that if I don't dwell on it, it'll just come to me. It seems like the more I dwell on it, it's like I'm pushing it away.
Yeah. Isn't that strange? Yeah, exactly.
So I don't know if people are out here because a lot of people are saying, you know, what you dwell on and what you think about, that's what you'll become. I wonder if they're being disingenuous or if they just don't know, or if it's just me. No, my reality has been like this. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I think you're absolutely correct, because one of the things I talk about, and this is a very important thing that we have to keep in mind, that the universe is an energetic field. It works differently for certain people, which is why I always say that magic is experimental. What works for me may not work for you. So I hold valid all those things that people say, well, I focused on it every day and it came to fruition. Another person says, well, I just forgot about it, didn't think about it, and it happened. They're both valid because it's about the belief system and it's about the energetic field and how it works. This is why science has a hard time validating magic, because when they go into their scientific rooms and their labs and they do the experiments, they can't duplicate it over and over again because it keeps changing on them, because reality conforms to the observer. So what they realize is, kind of goes back to the placebo effect, that you know, the expectations of the observer have a lot to do with how things unfold in reality. So it's very individualistic in terms of how things work.
Right. And now I got a question for both of you. It seems, and this is just me monitoring my own history and a few people I know, it seems that something is up on Earth to where the more you doubt something, it has a stronger chance of actually not working out. However, if you have that same amount of faith in something, it's not as likely that it's going to work out. It's almost like the doubt factor is stronger than the faith factor, or at least this is what I've seen. Now, does that make any sense?
Absolutely. And I'll tell you why that is, right? Going back to the 0 point energy field, and that is the field that contains information that we exchange. Now, this society is fear-based. They teach us to be fear-based. So what has these stronger emotions? What have we've been programmed to believe? Have we been programmed to be optimistic, which is a Ma'at principle, or we have programmed to be fear and doubt-based? We have been programmed to be 90% fear and doubt-based. So the universe, the energetic field, will in fact manifest your strongest dominant emotion. And what is your strongest dominant emotion? The things that you fear and you doubt.
You know, I've like noticed that also, you know, because even though when we communicate with each other, we know that we communicate non-verbally, that we communicate verbally, so on. But just even our body gives off chemical signals. So like when you have fear, you're actually triggering like a biochemical reaction in your body, and you're giving off all this stuff that other people are picking up as well in your environment. So even on that level, you know, people can pick it up and they react to it, even though they may not be thinking about it. So you could be impacting people and completely changing how they interact with you. And you could be trying to come across like, you know, you're confident, you're not afraid, and so on. But everything else in your body is sending out this signal, and their body, you're communicating with them, and they're having this exchange, and they're reacting to you based off of that truth of what you're actually emitting in that way.
They say that the majority of our communication, which I call a sub-communication, is nonverbal. But don't forget, keep in mind too, that we're talking about again, going back to the Ma'at principle, the principle of interdependence and interrelationship, that we're all tied. And this ties directly into the 100 monkey principle with the Japanese mesquite monkeys, meaning that state, or the emotional state that you're in, is transferable. So what one person thinks can be picked up by another person. That energy is picked up. And if we're all having the same thoughts, what does that create? That creates a pendulum, an ergobore. And that pendulum, or ergobore, could be good or bad. It could be one that manifests money for us, or it could be one that manifests bad luck for us. That makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
It does.
This is why when I talk about things like super learning and accelerated learning, I say it's very important that if your child, for example, or if you're a student, if you're mediocre, that you get into a classroom that has the top level A students, because that energy will bring you up to par. But you have to make sure that you're not, like, for example, the predominance of people in the class are top students, and it will elevate those few students who are not at that level. But you can't suddenly inundate that classroom with below average students, because it throws off the energy, you know?
Right. I got another question too. I guess it's about passion and desire, because that's another thing where I hear about, you know, the more passionate you are, the more you desire something, you'll get your heart's desires. And what it's been like for me, when I treat things like they're not so important, but I do acknowledge that I need it, I do acknowledge that I want it, but I don't get emotional. I kind of just, I guess the way my spirit is, it's like I'll be okay whether I get it or not. Mm-hmm. That's usually when I get it.
Exactly.
If it's something that I'm like, I gotta have this, and I'm gonna die if I don't get it, then it's like the universe will keep it from me.
Yeah. That's what we call it. Vadim Zeland, the quantum physicist, in his book Reality Transurfing, talks about that, calling it excess energy, because what you're doing is that excess energy is pushing the pendulum, and the pendulum's going to swing right back at you. So, and the way I teach that and the way I approach it is that the more you place importance on something, the more you put it out of the realm of possibility. And I gave the example of if there's a woman that I'm madly in love with, right? And I think about her all the time, and I say I do like a ritual where I could meet her or where she would fall in love with me. I put her on a pedestal. So inadvertently, I am signaling to my subconscious mind, man, she's out of your league. You'll never get her, you know, because I'm so focused and trying so hard to obtain her that I'm doing all this stuff magically too, you know, so you kind of thwart your own efforts.
Is it kind of one of those things where it's almost like you're telling the universe that you don't have it?
Yes, exactly.
So the universe agrees with you.
Exactly. It's like I'm lacking here. And then the universe says, okay, we'll create lack for you.
Right.
You know, this is why it's important. One of the things that's important when you're doing reality manifestation is that you embody the feeling of already having the thing. You know what I mean? How would a person with $1 million act? You know, and I've always taken this for example. Like a lot of times I deal with people who disrespect me. You know what I mean? But then again, one of the things that my teacher, we would call him Shechem, and that is the term. Shechem means man or a person of power. One of the things he would say is like, you know, well, you're a magi, you have all this power, and that person is just a child to you. How would you treat a child? And then I was thinking, yeah, I wouldn't kind of like get into a debate with them, or I wouldn't argue with them. I would just go, okay. You know, I would just talk down to them in a way. So I've learned just to go through life, and when people say things that might rattle my animal spirit, I'm just go, oh, okay, and just move on. You know what I mean? I don't really get into that type of thing. In fact, I have a friend, he talks about the relationships he's been in, and he's been arguing with women and stuff. I say, you know, it's interesting because the relationships I get into, I really don't argue, and I have like a zero tolerance policy. If something goes wrong, that's it. You know, I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to get upset. But you know, I think it's good just to and it goes back to being at peace, because that's one of the prerequisites for manifesting things. That you have to be at peace within yourself. So sorry, I got off topic there.
No, I think that relates to what I was talking about not getting emotional, feeling like I'll be okay whether or not I get it.
Yeah, that's a very important aspect to it, because we call that outcome dependent. You know, I used to listen back in the day. Actually, my mother used to listen to these R&B songs where the singer would be like, "You're my everything. I'll die without you." And even as a kid, I knew that those songs were very bad for you, because they were programming you to say you placed all your value in something. If you don't have it, you're not complete. You know what I mean? So I learned that when I'm trying to manifest things in my life, to say, well, what if you don't get it? I'm going to be at peace anyway. I'll be all right, you know, but still keeping that target and that goal in mind.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And I think that's what kind of like trips a lot of people up, because, you know, it's hard to tell someone, well, you have to still focus on the goal, but still be okay without getting it. So then the doubts crop up about, well, is this manifestation stuff really worked? And it should work, you know, all the time. Well, it does work, but there are certain things that we do that sabotage it. You know what I mean? Inadvertently. Of course, no one does it on purpose, you know, but we do inadvertently. And that there are things that were in our destiny that we're not meant to have. You know, you can try all you want, you know, like it's not in my destiny, I know, to be absolute ruler and power dictator of the planet. So I would love to have that type of position, but it's not within my destiny, you know. But it could be in Kim Jong's destiny to be a leader of, was it North Korea, you know. So,
you know, I think that we all have like our own destiny of like what it is that we're here to do, and that kind of goes back to being centered in that, so that no matter what you have or you don't have, or what you think you don't have or have, that as long as you're at peace with you and you have your centeredness in that from that place, from that foundation, then everything else is added onto you. And I feel like a lot of people in different, you know, religious, you know, faiths, like that's kind of what they're alluding to when they talk about, you know, putting all their faith and their hope and their trust in love and God, is that centered place of being at peace with you, and then all the external things, anything extra that you would add on to that comes more easily because it's in alignment with what you already are. And so you have no choice but to attract it. Of course, you'll bring it in. But if you're not centered and you're not at peace, you're not going to be able to bring that in.
That's an important point. What you said was alignment. I want to translate that to, there's a really good book that was written called The Flow. And I've noticed that when things synchronistically have worked out for me, have been in place, I've been in that kind of flow. And a lot of athletes talk about this. I don't know if you guys understand where I'm coming from, but I remember when I was had that first meeting with Ron Howard and Brian Grazer. After that, I got into the flow to where I was happy, I was content, and things started to fall in place. In one meeting, I actually, after that, had a meeting with Paramount Pictures and Disney. And Disney actually called me, said, we heard you did a movie and we'd like you to come and pitch a reboot of that movie. So the president of my studio, which was Trauma Studios, got on the flight with me because I was terrified to make the pitch. So he said he'd do the pitch for me. And we flew out to Disney, and Disney treated us so well. And we did the pitch for Disney, you know. And the first thing, I remember walking into the meeting with Disney, and Disney said, listen, we saw your film and we absolutely loved it. And at the time I was very disappointed in the film because I think I didn't have the budget that I wanted to make that film. So I did it on a low budget. But I remember just being in that flow of just from there going to Paramount, do the pitch there, from there meeting up with various different well-known actors, and things were just working out, you know what I mean? And what I mean by the flow, it was just that where I didn't feel time passing, I was so immersed in what I was doing and enjoying it that I just went along, and I wasn't consciously aware of anything in terms of could go wrong. I was just enjoying the process, flowing with it, you know, everything was, and this is one point I wanted to bring up. A lot of times when something is very new, and you're immersed in that flow of the newness of it, that is a great opportunity for manifestation because it allows you to not think so much about doubts or be self-conscious, that you're more immersed in the process, you know, or immersed in how the things are new. And it just, for some reason, that's another component to manifestation. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Oh man, for some reason, because I've lived in a lot of different cities in the States and really all over the world. And it seems like when I'm new there, when I first arrived, just all these opportunities are coming my way for some reason. So I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
You know,
go ahead.
This, to me, it reminds me of like, you know, talking about that newness of, you know, being brand new to something, like you haven't had any experiences, you don't have expectations one way or the other, is like the Fool card in the tarot deck. It's like you're at this brand new space and, you know, you're starting this, you know, new cycle, this new journey. And it also, to me, is like you're at your purest self. Like you're just operating purely, like solely off of just you. And without expectations, without any expecting things to go a certain way. And it's just, you know, being in the flow. And I also think about, like, this brings up for me, you know, because I pull from like a lot of different faiths and stuff, but I think about that verse that says, you know, seek first the kingdom of God, and then all these things will be added to you. And so what is the God? You know, that's different for a lot of different people, but to me it's you, your heart, in your heart, being in that heart space and being centered in that, and being able to just operate from that without worrying about what's going on externally, and just, you know, almost like an innocence, but, you know, not almost like a naive innocence. So you're just kind of going with the flow. You're just doing what you need to do in that moment, and then things will be added unto you. Like you're going with it. But when you're trying to do things a certain way, or you have an expectation of it going a certain way, or you're trying to manipulate it, you're resisting and you're going against that flow. And so when you're doing that, you're going against kind of like the flow of the universe. And that's really difficult. So you might be able to get stuff to kind of work, but it's harder and it's a lot more difficult than to just go with what already naturally is, in which at a core level, I believe we want to do that. We want to be in the flow of that. We want to just kind of go with that. And when we do that, we don't have to work so hard. You have to do effort, but it's not like in the sense of struggling and striving against, you know, all this different energy and all this different stuff. It's, you're kind of going along with and being, you know, helped along because you're going with the flow of what's already happening.
I strongly
That you're
agree.
Oh man, that's so good. I'm glad we're recording this because I want to go back and listen to what you just said. That is so good. I mean, just the part about the Fool card, and I, you know, this happened fairly about 2 years ago. I stopped planning things because I was my background is a digital producer, and what we do is that you know, in addition to just working in tech, we always look at the worst case scenario and come up with plan A, B, and C. So when I was doing 2 years ago reality manifestation, I was always looking and planning different outcomes. And I noticed that all those things I planned never happened. But it was when I didn't have those plans in place that the universe would surprise me, you know? So I've kind of let go a little bit. And you're absolutely right. When you let go a little bit, then it comes your way, you know?
You know how they say once an idea is out there, then like anybody can grab it?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think what you were just saying, could that be related to what I was talking about? How it seems like when I tell someone about something, that's when it starts going downhill. Could that be the same thing as making too many plans? Or could it be related to that? You know what I mean?
Well, you know, one of the things is that, and I learned this from Bashar. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Bashar, but Dara Anka, he channels Bashar. And, you know, him and I have talked. And we actually have a same background. He's in film, I'm in film, you know. And one of the things that he says is that you cannot limit the universe and how something will come to you. And one of the things that we do in terms of limiting things is we always think that things have to come to us monetarily. And he gives the example of you want this amount of money to buy a house, but you never think that someone can just gift you a house. You know what I mean? So we really place limitations on how the universe can bring us things. So maybe that's, I think, what you're referring to.
You know, also when you said that about, you know, using your words and telling people what you're doing, like I think of another verse. I don't know if it's from the Bible or not, but I'm thinking of, you know, life and death is in the power of the tongue. So when we say things, you are kind of birthing things out. So you can create things or you can destroy things. So if you're trying to bring something into being and you say it and somebody else hears it, it can seed them and they might, you know, get that idea. Like we, you know, I also think that there's nothing new under the sun. That's another phrase. So it's a lot of times we get ideas and it may feel like it's, you know, new, but maybe somebody else has had it and, you know, it might be new to us. But when we say things too, you know, people are impressionable. And so they hear that and then, you know, they might take it and run with it, you know? And so sometimes it is better to, you know, work in silence or allow that to, you know, allow the idea to gestate and have it like almost like when a woman is pregnant, you know, like you have this gestation period where it's developing, it's growing, and then, you know, don't prematurely put out what it is that you are, you know, growing in yourself, this idea, this concept. That way it has a chance to develop and mature before you birth it out. You know, you don't want to prematurely birth it and then it not survive, whether that's because somebody else takes it and does whatever with it. But that's something I found for me, like just, you know, from a practical point is, you know, I don't tell everybody everything I'm doing just because some people may not be supportive. And if they say something that's negative about it, some people are stronger than others with that, but it might get in your mind and now you have a negative thought about it and you're not going to support it as much, or you may not be as driven to do that thing. So whenever I have desires or something I'm trying to that are like in its, you know, the earliest gestation phase, I usually keep it quiet. And then when I'm ready to present it, after it's had a chance to kind of like grow, the seed of it has had a chance to grow, then kind of put it out, you know, then it can kind of withstand being out, you know?
You're absolutely right, because I remember one of the things when I was in priesthood that my Shechem was saying, don't abort the baby. And we would equate this to the goddess Set and the immaculate conception and her birthing Heru. But you have to nurture it, you know, and when you abandon your goal prematurely, you abandon the baby. You know, so he would equate things to that. Um, Aset is trying to join. She wants to join, but she's having trouble. So you two just clicked on the link, right, and it lets you in, right? She's for some reason she's having trouble.
If she's on a phone, it's gonna be hard to do it from that link. It needs to go to her email. It's gonna be hard to do it from your chat room.
Oh, it's gonna be hard to do. Okay.
On a phone, unless she's on a computer, she shouldn't be having any problems.
Right. So I'll tell her to just just email me. Just email me and I'll send you a link. Email me and I will send the link. Now, let me ask you guys this. This happened to me a number of times. I mean, it happened to me more times than I can count. Have you ever had a situation where your fear actually manifested? You know, and I remember this happened like several years ago when I was doing a contract assignment, and I think I kept coming late for some reason. And every time I got off the elevator, the boss was right there, walking by or getting a cup of coffee, and it seemed like so synchronistically annoying. I was just like, how does this keep happening? You know? Have you ever had something like that happen? Like,
yeah,
thing that you don't like keeps like manifesting.
Yeah, a car accident.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I manifested a car accident, unfortunately.
Ooh.
Thinking about it, because I had a friend that was like really, really injured in one, and for whatever reason, it stuck in my mind about, you know, just being so afraid on the road, and ended up getting in one pretty shortly after that. I mean,
wow.
Yeah, and I hadn't been in one in over a decade, so I'm sure I manifested it out of that fear of always just, you know, thinking. That's what I was saying earlier about. It seems like the doubtful things and the negative things have more power here.
Yeah, because we're trained to just to be fearful of things. Look at the nightly news. You tune in, and the lead stories are always something fear-based. You know.
And it's like like I was saying, if I had that same amount or even more of a positive faith in something, it would not be as guaranteed to work out. So I see what you're saying about how we're trained.
Yeah, we have to change that, you know, and it's very difficult because we're all connected, and that fear resonates, and we're all picking up on that fear energy. You know what I mean? And I mean, there are places in the country, and Elle and I were talking about this earlier, and you joined in, GK, where you'll walk down the street and you're afraid to look at people in the eye. You know what I mean? And there's other parts where people walk and say good morning, you know? So yeah, we are definitely trained in a way to put more energy towards that fear. And that's the 3D realm. That's being trapped in the ego and trapped in the materialism of the third dimension. And we have to learn to rise higher and start really focusing on best possible outcomes in our lives, and to be more ma'at, optimistic. You know what I mean? And we're not very optimistic creatures, you know, and we've been trained that way, you know. And a lot of part of that is that, you know, we don't think good things can happen to us.
And also, I wanted to add that, you know, the subconscious mind, like I've heard that it doesn't understand when you say not to do something. So if usually when you're in fear, you're saying, oh, I don't want to get in an accident, or do not do this, or don't have this happen. And so you're actually telling your subconscious mind, do this thing.
Yeah.
So when you're not in fear, you're saying, you know, I want this, or, you know, something, and it's easier to kind of pick it up. But if you're in that fear thing and you're doing that over and over and over again, because usually when you're fearful, and I do that, I'm like, oh, you know, please don't drop this, or please don't slip and fall, or please don't, no, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this. I'm actually telling my brain, do it, do it, do it. And, you know, we were talking earlier about sub communication, you know, how there's this element to us where we're communicating with each other at these different levels. We're also communicating with our own body. Like, you know, there's this idea that we have more than one brain. You know, we have a brain that's all throughout our body. It's not just in our skulls. It's dispersed all throughout. And so it's communicating stuff to us. And so when we're fearful and saying not to do something, we're kind of telling our muscles to do it as well.
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. The brain doesn't understand not to. Don't do this. Don't do that. That's why you have to really think in terms of, because the only thing that's real is the present now moment, the forever now moment. So telling your brain not to do something is equivalent to telling it to do something. You know what I mean? So we have to be very careful. This is why they've created a whole field called neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, about how you communicate to the mind, which is very important because you have to learn how to give the subconscious mind commands. And for those of you who are not into NLP, it's very worth studying. It's very interesting. And it really creates a pattern of language that will help you. Because many times we say things without even realizing it, like we make a mistake and we're like, oh, I'm so stupid. You don't want to say things like that. And the actual Kemetic people, their language was specifically geared around more like the more optimism, the more manifesting reality. Even I talk a lot about this, even their names had certain frequencies that would allow that when you said the person's name, it will allow them to fulfill their destiny because you're sending them the correct energy and vibration. Our Western names don't have those type of vibrational frequencies. So when you say, John and Tara, it doesn't have that power behind it, but it does have a certain amount of energy, which is very careful that we in how we name our children. Make sure that they're given really strong, powerful names that will help them fulfill their destiny. And there have been Harvard studies done into this where kids with certain names go off to achieve things in life, whereas kids with very negative either prefix or whatever in the name don't do as well in life. So there's a lot of studies that back that up and everything. So, but the other thing I wanted to touch upon in terms of the reality manifestation, has there been any real blocks that you have felt that you have like hit a wall in terms of trying to achieve something?
I had to think about that for a bit.
Well, for me, when I was telling my story earlier about the tree, which is I know that's a little much for some people, but, for me, I found that in trying to manifest things, in order to try to manifest the stuff that I wanted to manifest and that I do want to manifest, I'm having to unmanifest a whole bunch of like nonsense that I did manifest in my life, which, getting into proper alignment with what's for your highest good, getting yourself in the flow of what you're supposed to be doing when you've not been doing that for a long time, it can feel very much like, your whole world is falling apart. And at some level it is, but it's because you've built up, because we're always manifesting, we're always building things up. Like that's becomes like this fabric of our lives. But when you start trying to manifest specific things, it's almost like this butterfly effect to all these other things. If it's not in alignment with that, then they have to come down. Like it's going to get messed up. And you might feel like, well, I'm trying to do all this good stuff and like all this stuff is messing up. Why is it that now that I'm making this effort to try to do this and this and this, all this other things are falling down? And it's because in order to get that, those things have to fall. And then,
What's that? I think we lost it.
Could I I don't mean to change the subject, but I wanted to go back to something you spoke on a little while ago before I forget about acting when things are new.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to synchronicity, one thing I've noticed is when you act quickly on ideas when they come. Oh, I'm getting a lot of feedback.
Oh, do you have your
That's somebody has their, that's not true, is it? I think the noise is coming from the house.
The house?
Okay.
Is that a US set?
I think she muted now.
The house. How are you, Hatepu?
But yeah, I was just gonna. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just trying to say real quick. It seems like when you act quickly on things without waiting around and lingering and overthinking things, it seems like it works out better when I guess the universe sends you some wisdom or this great idea in your head. Act on it without overthinking it. Now, I'm not saying always be impulsive and, don't use your intelligence. I'm not saying that. But for me, it seems that when I act on things quicker, it has a better chance of working out in my favor. And then when I hold on to the idea and I linger around, and then how days become weeks. Next thing you know, it's years.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work. Because I guess it's like the power of that idea is gone.
Yes, yeah. That's true. That's true. Yeah, I think. Do you think it's also because it's new? It's very new, right?
Yeah. That's why I was relating that to what you said about just acting.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah.
Yep.
Right. So that the whole thing is like, acting right away. But I also want to jump back into what. Sorry, because I just want to make sure I don't forget this. Where Elle was talking about manifesting things, and I remember that. Sometimes the problem that we can have is we have a shadow self, and within that shadow self, we've got our fears, and desires, and all of this stuff. And some of us are very good manifestors. And I recall, this is fairly recently, that I had went to a specific place where it was a ley line, and I started manifesting a lot of things, and even things that I didn't want, and that became a real problem. And what I did was I became more aware of the fact that I got a clean house, meaning I got to spiritually elevate myself to the point of where I got to get rid of those fears. I've got to learn that, hey, if those fears were to come to fruition, I will be all right, and I shouldn't fear them. So that's something I just wanted to make a point, so that we don't forget that we do have a shadow self. We do have those fears trapped in the shadow self, and those fears can come out at us. But we need to have faith in ourselves that we can handle whatever the world throws to us, even if it's our own self and our own power throwing that at us. Are you back out? I think we lost her.
I don't think she joined us.
I think we lost her. So with that said, I want to go back to what you were saying. I noticed, GK, that when the newness factor wears off, and I noticed that when that newness is there, that I have to take advantage of the opportunity to manifest what I want, because it's only for a short period of time. And going back to what you were saying, is I noticed, like, for example, if I would travel to California, there's certain times where I would stay there for a while. I noticed, like, well, this newness factor will wear off in about 3 months. So I got to take advantage of the opportunities and the synchronistic things that happen while they're there. You know what I mean?
Most definitely.
Otherwise, it'll go away. So that's my experience and how I feel in terms of the newness factor.
Most definitely. I've seen that over and over in different places I've moved. Absolutely.
Yeah. Hold on. I think, Elle, are you there?
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry, my connection dropped.
Oh.
But I'm back.
Did you forget to pay your phone bill?
Actually, I didn't have it charged up enough. Like, I tried to have it charged, and I'm the worst about that. But yeah, it was like slowly dying, and then it was like, you know how your phone will die, but it's like the screen is dead, but it's still going in the background.
Yeah.
So it's just like crap. And then I know you heard that. It's like the last thing you heard was crap.
Yeah, yeah, I was like, oh my God, did somebody come in there? Did they attack her?
No.
Did she manifest something?
Maybe.
But
I said not. Yeah.
I want to tell you guys, and I talked about this before on my channel, about an episode of Tales from the Dark Side. It's a really good episode, and it really illustrates about how things can work, where it's about this woman who learns that she can manifest, but she manifests not by will, but just manifests everything. And eventually, in the episode, she tries to tell people about her power, and they witness it, but she can't control it, and it eventually causes a fire in her house, and it burns down the house, and she dies. And when I went to that ley line, because I was specifically going there to gain more power. That's exactly how I felt. Like I was manifesting everything, and it was driving me crazy because one of the things I saw happening was synchronistic events. Like, for example, I'd be sitting down and I'd be talking about, for example, a Subway sandwich, and then the TV would suddenly play a commercial for Subway. You know, I'd be thinking about someone, and then they would call right away. And it was literally driving me crazy. I didn't like it. I was like, this is just too much to deal with, because it just continually kept happening everywhere I went. And people were actually witnessing it, and they were freaking out too. And a lot of that happened to be not good stuff. You know, I was like manifesting stuff that I didn't want to manifest, you know what I mean? But going back to also what I was saying was that whether we realize it or not, there is one sticking point that we all have that it will give us trouble in manifesting. And those are usually things associated with our destiny. And I was kind of alluding to that, saying, have you noticed that there's one thing that you've always wanted, no matter how much you've tried, you can't manifest it? And that's usually something that it's one of those things where you have to personally deal with as a destiny, learn to overcome it. And when you do, you'll be able to manifest it. And this is something I've seen, for example, with various different people that I've talked to and counseled. It could be anything from, like, for one example, a woman says, I could never get into a relationship, and then we did the reading and found out that that is something that she is not going to be able to manifest on her own in this lifetime, because it's actually a pre-life agreement she made that she would not be able to hold down a successful relationship, unfortunately, but she'll have to go through just these short-term relationships or dating in this lifetime. Others, it could be with individuals who are seeking to be wealthy or acquire wealth, and no matter how many mantras they recite, their destiny is not to be wealthy in this lifetime. I'm not saying they're going to be poor, but they're not going to hit the lotto. You know what I mean? So there's always that point that trips us up. We want something, but we can't seem to get it. And I don't know, but I can tell you a lot of stories of guys who've come to me and they want a rap career. And I'm like, well, that's not in the cards there. You know what I mean? You can do, and they was like, can you give me a mantra that'll help me get my music career off the ground? I'm like, no, it's not going to happen. I don't care what mantra, what secret herb you put on the ritual table, it's not going to happen, you know? So that was what I was asking in terms of, have you found a sticking point to manifesting something?
You know, I just want to add to, like, because that could be really depressing for people when you think that, you know, there's this thing I want and I'll never be able to get it, you know, particularly when it comes to love or even the rap career. Like, if someone really feels like that's what they want and they're told that they could never get that, I think it's important to realize that the things that we are not able to get sometimes are things that deep down we may not actually really want, because a lot of our desires and wants, or at least mine, I noticed, are conditioned. They're conditioned in us from external things around us. And if, like, very few of us have been able to grow up or come into adulthood being true to, like, what we were talking about before, like that fool, being at that point of being true to yourself, like being in your own energy of who you are and who you're meant to be. And when you are there, you know, you may not need to have a rap career. You don't need to have $1 million. You could be the poorest person on the planet, but you are at perfect peace and completely happy and completely content. And you have the ultimate joy because you are doing exactly what it is that you want to do. And you're exactly in alignment with what you want to do. So everything else works for you.
Oh my God.
It's just because so many of us can't do that. It's like you're stressed out and you spend your whole life pushing, you know, going against the flow and trying to get all these things that are not yours. It's not on your path. It's not a part of what is to be given to you. And the reciprocated part of that is that it's also what you also give back to the universe and this interconnectedness that we're in. By not being that thing that you're supposed to do, you're actually taking away from everybody else, because it's like this butterfly effect of things. Like, if you show up the way that you agreed to show up, then that helps everybody, that blesses everybody, and it blesses you as well. But when you're trying to do all this other stuff that's not in alignment because, you know, that's the thing to do, or you see all these other people doing it, that puts you out of alignment, and that actually kind of hinders other people too. And it creates this, you know, butterfly effect as well, of like having everybody just a little bit off. And I think that it's, you know, the universe is self-correcting. It'll try to correct it by not allowing you to get that, you know, ripping the rug off from underneath you so that you're forced to have to course correct. And, you know, that's because I'm real big on tarot, you know, that's like the tower card. You have that rug ripped from underneath you and you have to start over to get back to 0 point so that you can rebuild and get yourself in alignment, you know, because there's an order to this. It's like this ordered thing, like we're all a part of this massive body, you know, in Christianity, that, you know, they call it the body of Christ, or, you know, it's this idea that it's this living thing, maybe not breathing, but this living thing, and we're all a part of it. We all have a role to play in that. And when we're in alignment, we're at peace because we're doing what we're supposed to do.
Well,
I'm sorry.
That's great. I mean, that's exactly right, because this society teaches you not to be your authentic self. You know what I mean? And I think that you're so on point with that, is when things work out for you, is when you express who you are and you're authentic about who you are. But we're so taught to take on a persona.
No, you just said it. Exactly what I was going to say. I strongly agree with both of you.
And I see this with a lot of, for example, Black men, where I see they are like this template or cardboard cutout of one another. They all have to be hard on the outside, or like give this swag, this thing about having swag in a way, you know what I mean? And I'm like, wow, who's the real you, you know?
I think too many people go through life and they continue to go through life cycle after life cycle, reincarnating and never, ever sitting down and getting in touch with who they are. And they never know what they actually want.
Yeah. And I don't blame them totally, because, you know, the society is not structured to embrace being authentic. You know what I mean?
Correct.
And because you ever had that somebody say to you, "You're different," you know?
It just means you're real. That's all it means.
Well, you know, people are punished for being different also. Yeah. It's like a very, you know, a message is sent and a message is made of people who try to not fall in with the status quo. And so it's like silently teaching, you know, people to do this, be this, and be a certain kind of way. And so it kind of mutes you. It prevents you from showing up the way that you're meant to show up. But it just that kind of sets you up for struggle, because you're going to struggle against the whole universe, basically, to do something that you didn't come to do.
Yeah,
it's easier for the powers that be to control a population that's all in one form.
Yeah, uniformity.
Right.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, GK. That's 100% right, because if everybody's operating off the same template, then it's easier to manipulate and control. You know, which is why I have an issue. And what I was saying was that we have, you know, I was telling people, well, this is a side note, that you can't make hip hop like, for example, they want to make hip hop Black culture. I'm like, no, it's not. It's just, that's a separate segment of it. But anyway,
it's poverty culture is what it is.
So I want to give the house a chance to speak. Do you have anything you want to add? Because she's been sitting quietly. Can you hear us?
No, I just want to listen.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
I'm cultivating the habit of listening.
Oh, good. That's always a good way. But so I don't know, man, because you touched on a really good subject. Is that because now we're entering the realm of trailblazers, like individuals like myself and other individuals who come along, and especially with your channel, GK, because you are talking about different stuff now, and a lot of people don't want to hear that, because they want to go with the same narrative. You know what I mean? And we don't have to get into the whole details of it, but it's very difficult to be a trailblazer or to be authentic, you know? And this society doesn't reward it, like we were saying. So,
especially for people who are in a box of trying to be so-called Black. Because they're trying to fit the program that somebody who was not Black is telling them is Black.
Yeah. And
so it's really hard to do.
Yeah. So I don't know, like Elle, for example, like you have children. So like, how are you communicating with them in terms of individuality or who they are, you know?
Well, I mean, one thing, well, I used to be a public school teacher, before I had kids. And so what I learned in that situation was I didn't want my kids in that kind of structure because I felt like the way it's set up, I don't think it's intentional. I think it's difficult to manage large classrooms of kids. The way it's set up is it's a place for children to be conditioned, basically. And it does kind of stifle a bit. You have outliers. You have kids that do really well in those kind of environments and kids that are kind of struggle, and then kids that are just kind of lost in it. But it doesn't give you to me, the environment to really discover yourself. So what I chose to do with my kids was to homeschool. And so, that's what I've been doing for like the past, I have a 9-year-old and she's 4th grade. We've been homeschooling. We've been doing it this whole time. But the funny thing is, there's not a lot of African-American homeschoolers. However, that number has definitely been increasing as more and more people of color are finding that, public schools and things like that are not the best place for their children. And there's so many more resources and ways that you can do it. Like it's come a long way from, just being religiously based and you're just trying to shelter your children from, society. It's actually, the kids get more of an opportunity to be exposed to different enriching experiences. I feel like it falls more in line with like the natural rhythm of like people's sleep cycles and children's sleep cycles and things like that. But I personally have had to struggle a lot because a lot of the pushback that I got with doing that really came from the African American community. Like I really had to, I wasn't homeschooled and I had to like, stand up against family and just all kind of people, even people that are not even, shouldn't have anything to say about it. Culturally, it was almost as if, I was violating some unspoken code by trying to homeschool my kids. And that was difficult at first. I've since learned to, stick to my guns and find support where I can get it. But there's a lot of conditioning that has taken place over so many years that, even as a parent, if you're going to step up and try to do things for your children, there are just things in place culturally and otherwise that are going to come in and try to snap you back. And I feel like there's a lot more people who would be willing to do that if they had somebody to help them out and support them in their decisions and not, if your social group or the people that are supposed to be surrounding you are not really supporting that, or there's no place for it, it's very difficult to go out kind of on a limb and do that, or to find community with other communities that don't look like you, but that's, where you're getting your support from. And I think that kind of blocks, that hinders a lot of people. And I can understand that, why a lot of people would kind of throw in the towel on trying to get their kids to be individualistic and not be conditioned. Because I could say, for one, like as a mother, it would be so much easier for me if I just, bowed down and just was like, okay, I'm just going to let my kids, let's go with the social conditioning. Let's just do the norm of what everybody's doing and just do whatever. You have to pay for it. You have to pay something for that. It costs you something socially and so on. And so I think that hopefully what my children have learned is like through this process of being able to, have these different experiences, that, it's okay to be who you are. And they witness some of the stuff that I go through and trying to do it, it doesn't affect them as much because they're so used to, the good thing is they're so used to being homeschooling, they don't know any different. So that's kind of like, that's a positive that I could look back on. Like, they're just kind of like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, but I can understand the value of it. And I can see the difference, and it's not to like judge other people's kids or something, but I could tell the difference when my kids go places compared to like kids that are in a classroom all day and they're stifled and they're not able to have totally different behavior patterns when they're in certain social groups because, they've just had different experiences. So yeah, that's what I have to say.
I commend you on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
And you can feed them better too without them eating that public school lunch.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
That lunch.
Yeah.
How are you though? Let me ask you this question though. I mean, will this be a conversation at some point? I mean, because you're definitely on the cutting edge of learning new things, especially with the new age reality manifestation stuff. I mean, is this something you're going to pass down to them?
Oh yeah. I think it's important. I think it's almost an imperative for them, because kids are living in such a different world than what we were. And I think that like as a whole, collectively, like we are starting to recognize that the ways that are, and this is so sad, it's so counterintuitive, but like the ways that our ancestors were living, or just like even like our parents and grandparents and so on, like the things that they did that got them through life are not the things that their children can do to help them thrive and be successful in this new world that we live in. Like things are changing so much that you really have to be able to think with your whole brain. You have to have integrated thinking, be able to not just compartmentalize things, which is very much the way that school is taught. You have to be able to be in the world and be comfortable with community and being out and about so that you can interact with people and function. And so those kinds of things are important, I think, for children to learn, in school. And then we just kind of release this whole generation of people, and then they're struggling to catch up with where the world is moving. So yeah, I definitely think like this kind of stuff is an aspect of that, because it's just living. You're actually teaching people how to be human too, because a lot of this is about, what does it mean to be human? How can I show up in the world as a human? What are my abilities as a human? How does the universe actually work? What is my place and my role in it? And, how can I impact that? And we are not taught that. We're just not taught that. People live whole lifetimes and die and never know that. So I feel like that is a huge injustice for children, because I believe children come into this world knowing that, and they forget that, and they lose that in part because of the adults who are already here, who condition them through no fault of their own. I don't think they're trying to do it, but it's because that's how we do things. And we cause them to fall in line and do this thing that they're functioning in a way that's opposite to what they came in here doing. And it's actually anti-life, and it's anti-cohesiveness, and it's all kind of things. Like we're teaching our children how to be destructive, or how to destroy our environment, how to destroy each other, how to separate from yourself. It's like a cognitive dissonance between who you are coming in, that you just intuitively know, and what you're taught to do in order to survive, or taught to be in order to have this face and to incorporate into the world in which you live in. So
that's it's interesting you said that, because one of the things my father, he was raised in the deep South, right? So one of the things that he always kind of instilled in me was, keep your head down, don't cause no trouble, don't look people in the eye, and you'll be all right. I'm like, Dad, things have changed. We don't have to be that way. You know what I mean? And what I have found out is that I've been on YouTube for a long time now, and I remember when I first got on YouTube and I was putting this information out, people literally thought I was crazy. They were like, didn't want to talk to me. But what I'm slowly beginning to see now is the climate has changed now. People are readily acceptive of what I'm saying. They're not 100% on board, but they're like, I kind of hear what you're talking about. I kind of get now what you were saying, And I think I think things are changing for the better in that aspect. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think like a shift is happening. I think it's like the newer, the younger generations are growing up, and they're coming in with different, views, and they're advancing how they see things, and, as it should be. So yeah. Yeah,
and it's a good thing. I think because I remember David Icke. He, I don't know if you guys are familiar with David Icke. He's a conspiracy theorist. He was talking about that he couldn't fill a phone booth full of people to hear him speak. Now he's filling stadiums. You know what I mean? And he's talking about all this conspiracy stuff. And I remember he had called this office that I was working at the time. This is many years ago, and he was asking if we could help set up an auditorium for him to speak at and everything. But I remember it was difficult to get people to come hear him talk. Everybody was negative. Now it's just like, everybody wants to hear what he has to say. The only problem that I'm having is he's not espousing or putting in place a way to live. And you'll see a lot of that on the internet. A lot of people are talking about the conspiracy stuff, but I think that we need to talk about the mechanics of these things. Like, how do we live? How do you manifest the reality that you want? You know what I mean? Because eventually what happens is if you're so immersed in conspiracy stuff, it then goes back to fear-based programming. You become fearful. You know, you're hearing about all these conspiracies, and then you're like, well, is there any positive things to life? You know what I mean? Which is why on my channel, I don't get too much into the negative aspects of that, because it could really taint your view and prohibit you from exploring your power to the fullest, you know?
I don't want to go too far off subject, but about David Icke, I don't know the timeline of his success, but I wonder if things turned around for the better after he started using that African shaman.
Oh, I know what you mean. I forgot his name.
Credo Mutwa.
Credo Mutwa. Yes, yes.
I wonder if that's what saved David Icke. That'd be interesting.
It definitely gave him legitimacy, you know, in certain realms, you know. Yeah, I remember him working with him and them teaming up, and yeah, very interesting. Good. That's a good point you brought up. You know what I mean?
It seems like a lot of times, and you know, not to get into too much of a racial discussion, but it seems like a lot of Europeans need to use melanated people to boost. If you know what I mean? Oh
yeah, and and I also think it's vice versa too. Like a lot of Black people, when they like for example. Take for example, like with me, when my movie first came out, I couldn't get BET to do an interview with me. But the minute they saw I was on CNN, they wanted to do an interview. So, yeah, you know what I mean? It works vice versa sometimes, you know? That was interesting. But I just want to check in the chat room and see if anybody has any final questions. Because I think this was a really good discussion, and it's very enlightening even for me. I was like, wow, some good stuff we shared here, and we have to do this again. So I want to thank everybody, GKL, thank you guys for showing up, and let's do this again, and let's exchange information and stay in contact, because I'm a real believer in, like the Bible says, if two or more agree, so shall it be, that we have to have this fellowship, and we have to come together. Even exchanging notes like this, we get a broader understanding of how the universe works. And we have this camaraderie where we feel that we're not alone. You know what I mean? Because many times we think we're fighting this battle by ourselves, but there's others out there who are also fighting the battle. And GK, you and I talk about this all the time about, you know, how the few that are out there, we have to find them and align with them, you know, because there's not many, you know.
That's right.
You know, so thank you all for attending, and I'll let you guys know we're going to do this again, but this broadcast will be on my channel for those who want to go back and watch it from the beginning. So until my next video, this is Ksarkma Keperu, and Amun Ra.